A National Roads Agency, Sanral, has reportedly hit a fiscal cliff. Now, this means it can no longer expand the roads under its responsibility, nor fully address the growing backlog of maintenance. Sanral currently manages just under 23,500 kilometres of the country's roads. The provinces are responsible for over 271,000 kilometres, and metros are responsible for over 66,000 kilometres, while municipalities cover 256,900 kilometres of our roads. The national government is moving forward with plans to transfer the roads under the provincial and local governments, and this, of course, you would know, are rapidly deteriorating due to the lack of maintenance, and they are now going to be transferred to Sanral's portfolio, or at least that seems to be the plan. So to discuss this matter further, we joined virtually by Sanral's Head of Engineering, Louw Kannemeyer. Mr. Kannemeyer, welcome to Morning Live. Thanks for your time.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity.
So let's just start with the fiscal cliff. And Sanral saying it has reached a stage where it needs to take rational and prudent decisions regarding its road network growth. So please explain to us what that means and Sanral's budgetary constraints at this time.
Yeah, at the start, it's very important for us at Sanral to categorically distance ourselves from the article, as nobody at Sanral was interviewed for the article. The article is really based on 2016 scenarios that Sanral included in our Horizon 2030 at the time, based on the then funding scenarios that were available. Fortunately for us, those scenarios did not realize. We've seen a substantial improvement in the budget allocations from National Treasury to Sanral that have nearly increased by 100% over the time. So we are most definitely not at a fiscal cliff as Sanral, as quoted in the article.
So if we look at some of the proposed plans, if you can also just verify that for us, is Sanral expected at this time to take on more responsibility and take over more of the country's road networks?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that Sanral's mandate is to look after the strategic and primary network of the country. That is a network of 35,000 kilometres. And as you've indicated, at the moment, Sanral is sitting at roughly about 23,500, 600 kilometres of that network, leaving us with another 11,400 kilometres of the strategic and primary network currently under the jurisdiction of provincial authorities to be transferred to Sanral in terms of our mandate.
So does Sanral have the necessary financial muscle to take over more of this network?
Yes, most definitely. As I said, the positive developments we've seen since 2016 in terms of budget allocations really puts us in a position. And the previous Minister of Finance have been actively advocating to the provinces for the transfer of those roads to enable that key network for the country, which is really the economic arteries of this country, to be transferred and be under the jurisdiction of Sanral as originally intended.
And of course, you speak about the key economic arteries. So which road networks would we be looking at?
So at the moment, and it's sometimes not always that obvious, there are parts of the national road network, routes like the N12, N9, for example, N14, that are not Sanral roads. Although it's got an N number, a national route number, it doesn't imply it's under the jurisdiction of Sanral. So you still have routes like that. You've got key regional corridors. Those will be your R routes, for example, where you'll have R27, those kind of routes that is still also earmarked to be transferred to Sanral.
And of course, then the question becomes, when this happens, given what the country is going through at the moment and Sanral's current financial state, are you able to lend support maybe to some of the other authorities that have to deal with and maintain roads? Are you able to assist them as Sanral at this point?
Yeah, I think, it's important to realize that, especially in the past 2 years, Sanral has been actively involved with the National Department of Transport in supporting all road authorities in the country. by making available our technology platforms that we use for our asset management, our mobile apps that we utilize to all authorities to assist them to be able to also apply those asset management practices to their road network. So we've definitely been actively involved in assisting them in managing their networks, and as indicated, where roads are there to be transferred, to request for the transfer of those roads to enable us to take over responsibilities for those roads earmarked to be under our jurisdiction.
So just in terms of some of the country's more neglected provincial and sometimes roads that are under the purview of the municipalities or metros, is there any talk at this point, Mr. Kannemeyer, that Sanral should take over some of those?
Where those are part of that 35,000 kilometres, so it's important to understand that 35,000 kilometres includes roads that could be crisscrossing some municipal boundaries, some small towns in terms of that. So where it's part of that 35,000 kilometre network, most definitely it is part of that transfer to Sanral. But it's important to realise that the intention is not to end up transferring the whole 750,000 kilometres of roads in this country to the jurisdiction of Sanral.
And of course, some people would say, well, if you look at the roads under Sanral's jurisdiction, well, we might as well, because the road infrastructure in the country is, in some instances, really abysmal. But you say that is not something that could happen.
Yeah. I think. In practical purposes, obviously that will be a decision to be made by our shareholder, the Ministry of Transport, along with National Treasury. Obviously, Sanral, as the implementing agent, will obviously take directive from the decisions made by our shareholder in terms of that. So it's really, as I said, a decision that needs to happen at a much higher level in terms of what is the ultimate network that Sanral should be responsible for. And obviously, where those decisions are made, Sanral will then, as implementing agent, go ahead and implement those decisions made by our shareholder.
So the question then that follows, Mr. Kannemeyer, is, of course, knowing that Sanral maintains most of the road network in the country that is tolled. So does this mean that the road network that will now be taken over by Sanral is likely to be tolled as well?
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that when it comes to toll roads, there's only a limited number of roads that are potentially tollable, because you need to have a certain traffic volume on the roads. So not all roads in the country are financially viable to be tolled if the traffic volumes along that corridor is insufficient. So if you look at, yes, currently there's 2,900 kilometres of toll roads in South Africa out of 750,000 kilometres. It is a small percentage of the total network. Studies that we have done have shown that the maximum potential network for tolling based on traffic volumes is sitting in the order of 7,500, 8,000. But that, once again, is going to be dependent on decisions to be made by our shareholder at government level in terms of how roads are going to be funded going forward, where tolling is one mechanism that provides a potential solution for a very small part of the network out there.
So you spoke about some of these economic arterial roads. As we speak right now, are there any plans or is there any sod turning likely to happen or about to happen, or perhaps has happened just recently with regard to some of these roads that will now come under Sanral's dispensation?
Not with regard to roads still to be transferred, but I think where you would have seen major activity in the recent times is work that have initiated on the N2 Wild Coast, which is a major new development that will unlock economic opportunities for the people there of the Pondoland area. We've seen the major projects on the N2, N3 in the Pietermaritzburg, eThekwini, Durban area. You've seen the major projects that we've unlocked on the R573 Molotto corridor, and there are similar projects that will be rolling out on the N1, N2 in various locations along the country on key economic areas that is of strategic importance to the country. With regard to the roads still to be transferred, obviously you need to understand that the roads first need to be under our jurisdiction before we as Sanral can intervene and start any potential projects on those roads.
So of the projects that you mentioned, like the Moloto Corridor and others, are there any concerns that you have at this point as Sanral? Because I'm asking that because I think a while back there was talk about some interference by the construction mafia on some of these projects.
I think it's important to understand that the whole industry, not just Sanral, but everyone, both private and public construction from 2017 were severely impacted by these activities in terms of the so-called 30% and the demands for those 30%. Sanral has embarked since then on a very strategic process of establishing project liaison committees for each and every one of our projects, where members of the surrounding community are part and parcel of that project liaison committee, so that they are able to get the information firsthand from Sanral in terms of what's going to happen, what job opportunities is going to be available when, what subcontracting opportunities, because what we realized is that there were external elements making use of the vacuum of information to misinform the local communities and then result them in protesting and stopping projects. Since Sanral has embarked on this process, and you've seen the major projects we've got on the go, we've had no major project stoppages like we previously had in 2017, where some projects were stopped for 6 months, some for even a year, because of disgruntled community activity based on misinformation. So we believe that the strategy we've adopted of keeping the community, the surrounding community, informed is paying dividends on Sanral projects.
So just as we wrap this up, so you say there is no financial concern for Sanral at this point, and all seems to be progressing well.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the notion of a fiscal cliff really does not exist for Sanral. Budget-wise, we've got sufficient budget to roll out all the projects we currently have planned. And as I said, you will continuously see all these announcements in terms of major contract awards. I mean, as you've seen during the previous financial year that just come to an end, Sanral has awarded 320 contracts to the value of 51 billion rand. And that clearly doesn't indicate a fiscal cliff in terms of as portrayed within the article.
Well, thank you so much. Sanral's Louw Kannemeyer speaking to us about the National Roads Agency and Sanral not, in concerned with regard to a fiscal cliff at this point, as reported in the media. So we'll park that there. As always, your comments are welcome at Morning Live SABC.